think we might have everybody we're going to have at the moment already, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover today. But welcome everybody again. This is the webinar on electrifying commercial vehicle fleets in Massachusetts, and we're going to jump right in. So a quick welcome. My name is Anna, and I work with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization working in Massachusetts and Rhode Island to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. And so we run a series of programs and services that help people access various clean energy technologies, whether that's electric vehicles or heat pumps or solar or wind or energy efficiency. And then we also do public policy advocacy work at the state level in both states to make sure that we've got the policies on the books that are going to get us where we need to go in terms of emissions reductions. Today, though, I'm joined by lots of people. So my name is Anna again, and I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Director here at Green Energy Consumers. My colleague Loie is on the call too. She is our energy efficiency expert. And then I will turn it over to Rhys and Jennifer to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. My name is Rhys Webb. I'm a senior program manager on the clean transportation team at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. So I help oversee our Mass Fleet Advisor program that we'll be talking to you about. And I can give a Mass CEC overview a little later on in the presentation. I'll pass it to Jenny.
Thanks, Rhys. Thanks, Anna, for having us here today. My name is Jennifer Kritzler. I'm the Deputy Director in the Northeast Regional Office for CALSTART. And CALSTART is a nationwide transportation nonprofit looking to decrease emissions in all sectors. So really excited to be here today.
A big welcome and thank you to you both. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, actually, sorry, I have to do my Zoom basics first. So for those of you who are on, you are muted throughout the webinar just to avoid background noise, but we absolutely encourage your participation. So please put any questions you have into the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll send the recording out and the slides out and a follow-up email with any resources we go over today. If you would like to use the closed captions, you should be able to click CC at the bottom of your screen. And with that, now I will talk about today's agenda. So we have a lot to cover today, but the order of operations here is we'll first just briefly do an overview of electric vehicles and fleets in general. We'll highlight some available models, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of incentives both for vehicles and for installing charging stations. And then Rhys and Jenny will go over the Mass Fleet Advisor program, which is an amazing resource in Massachusetts and sort of the end goal that we want to point all of you to. And then we'll have time for Q&A to make sure we get all of your questions answered. So with that, I'll start by just talking about electric vehicles and fleets in general. So a lot of the webinars and presentations that we do at Green Energy Consumers Alliance are about passenger vehicles and electrification, but here obviously we're talking about a different use case. But a lot of the things that we say when we talk about passenger electric vehicles are also true for fleet electric vehicles. So we're starting here with what are the reasons why a fleet should consider electrification. The first is really that there are lower operating costs. So electric vehicles are generally cheaper to fuel than gas or diesel powered vehicles. We'll show you a couple different ways of looking at this. This is some data from the US Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency. It is a couple of years old, but it still is useful to look at because it shows you the annual fuel cost range for light duty vehicles in this case by technology type. And you can see as you go down the y-axis, you get increasingly fossil fueled. And you can see that all electric vehicles not only have the lowest costs, but also the lowest range, so the most predictable fuel costs. And as you move from all electric vehicles to plug-in hybrids to gas-powered vehicles, the range increases a lot, as does the high end of that range. So you can see that over gas vehicles can go anywhere from $1,000 to basically $5,000 per year in terms of fuel costs, compared to all electric vehicles, which are well under $1,000 and have a much smaller range. You'll note that diesel vehicles are on here as a sort of smaller blurb. This is for light duty vehicles. So if this were to include medium or heavy duty vehicles, that range would be much larger, but the principle that you see here is clear that the more electric, basically the more efficient the vehicle and the lower the fuel costs. The data we just showed was national, so it takes national averages into account, but in Massachusetts and New England, we've generally got slightly higher electricity costs than much of the country. So we do math once a quarter to look at what are current electricity prices at our electric utilities, taking into account both the supply costs and the delivery costs, and what is the average efficiency of a new gas car versus a new electric car. And we basically do that math out to see how much a driver of, in this case, again, a light duty vehicle would save per mile switching from a gas to an electric vehicle. And you can see that the last time we did this, which was about a month ago, the savings were somewhere between 2 and 5 cents per mile driven. Later, we can talk more about what that looks like for medium and heavy duty vehicles or how to calculate that. But again, this is just a slightly different way of looking at what we saw on the previous slide with more local information. And we share how we do this math on our website. So if you want to take a look at our methodology and plug in your own numbers, you're more than welcome to do that. The second and very important part of operating costs, of course, is maintenance. And this is another place where electric vehicles really shine. So electric vehicles have much fewer moving parts than gas and diesel powered vehicles, which simply means there's fewer parts to break or rust or need to be replaced. The battery, the motor, and the electronics themselves require very little maintenance, and it's very unlikely that you'll ever have to replace the battery. And the batteries are generally warranted for 8 years or 100,000 miles. And so when organizations like Consumer Reports have looked at this and said, okay, how do these costs actually stack up with real drivers in the real world? In this report from 2020, they found that the average driver could save somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 over the lifetime of the vehicle on maintenance costs, or basically, in other words, cut maintenance costs in half. One particular technology that it's worth mentioning is regenerative braking, because this is a feature that is really key to electric vehicles. So basically, if you're driving an electric vehicle, you can turn this feature on. And then when you take your foot off of the accelerator, the vehicle will recognize that you're trying to slow down and slow you down faster than friction or just inertia would otherwise by basically spinning magnets around the wheels. And what that does is it slows the vehicle down without you having to use the friction brakes. So there are two benefits to that. One, you recapture a lot of energy that would have been lost to friction that you can put back into the battery to extend the vehicle's range. And two, you don't have to use the friction brakes as often, which means that they don't wear out as quickly. And so that is an example of one of the ways that EV maintenance and repair costs are a lot lower than those of gas or diesel powered vehicles. Here is another graph. This one is from the Department of Energy, and it shows you scheduled maintenance costs for different types of vehicles. So there's a lot of acronyms on this graph, but the column that's furthest on the left that says ICE vehicle is internal combustion engine. The next column is hybrid electric vehicles. Then we get plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And then the furthest on the right is battery electric vehicles. So the first thing that you can see is that the more electrified the vehicle, the lower those scheduled maintenance costs are. But more importantly, or equally importantly, you can see that there's a whole class of maintenance that is just not required for battery electric vehicles. So in the ICE hybrid and plug-in hybrid columns, there are those sort of 4 red sections at the top that are the timing belt, the oxygen sensor, the spark plugs, and transmission service. Battery electric vehicles don't have any of those. They're just not needed in the technology. And then in the purple section, there's a fair number of costs that don't exist either. Those are the fuel filters, the engine air filters, the oil filters. None of those are required. So this is just another visualization of those maintenance costs are so much lower because there's just fewer parts that need to be dealt with. So far, we've talked mostly about benefits to you, the driver or the fleet owner. I do want to take a moment to recognize the societal benefits, which are part of the reason, a huge part of the reason why we at Green Energy Consumers are such advocates for electric cars. So electric vehicles have no tailpipe emissions when they're running on electricity. If you have a plug-in hybrid and you're using the internal combustion engine, obviously there are emissions then. Even when you take into account how we're generating and distributing the electricity that is going into your vehicle's battery, EVs are still a lot cleaner. The Union of Concerned Scientists has a really cool tool where you can plug in your zip code and a vehicle, and it will show you what the emissions are compared to an average gas car, taking into account the mix of resources that are generating electricity on your local grid. And that shows you that if you switch from the average gas-powered car to an average EV, you're cutting your transportation emissions by more than 3/4, even if you're taking into account how we're generating the electricity. And those emissions are only going to go down over time as we add more and more renewable energy onto the grid. And then finally, definitely want to highlight that there are reductions both in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, but also the local air pollution that harms human health. And in our regular Electric Vehicle 101 webinars, we talk about the American Lung Association and all the math that they have done that shows how much damage our reliance on burning fossil fuels for transportation causes in terms of public health. But definitely wanted to put all of that out there, even if the rest of this webinar is talking more about the logistics from a fleet perspective. So in this next section, we'll talk about some of the available models, stress on some, because there's a lot of available models. And if we talked about all of them, this webinar would definitely be too long, but we wanted to give you sort of a smattering or a tasting to ground the rest of the conversation. So before I jump into specific vehicle models, I want to share a couple of resources. So if you have a vehicle fleet that includes light duty vehicles, we have a shopping tool in our Drive Green program at Green Energy Consumers Alliance that shows you all of the sort of fast facts you need to know about light duty electric vehicles. So the price, the range, how fast they charge, how much they can tow, other cool features that you want to know about, all of that is available on the Drive Green shopping tool. If you're looking for medium and heavy duty vehicles, there are a couple of lists where you can go poke around. I will stress that you should definitely go talk to Mass Fleet Advisor, and we'll get to that in the second half of the presentation. But if you're not quite there yet and you just want to poke around, you can look at the More EV list. So More EV is the state rebate program in Massachusetts, and they have a list of eligible vehicles for the More EV truck program. So this is anything from a pickup truck all the way up to a trash truck, and you can see what vehicle models are eligible, and you kind of can poke around there. CALSTART also has two awesome tools. One focuses on medium and heavy duty vehicles. That's the ZE tool, and you can indicate what class of vehicle you're interested in, and then the tool will tell you what manufacturers produce what models in that class. And then there's a new tool which I call OZE. Jenny, you can correct me if I'm not pronouncing the name of this tool correctly, but this one focuses on off-road vehicles and also refrigerated units, which I know is something that lots of folks are interested in and we'll talk more about today. So in the following slides, I'll talk about some examples, but go definitely look at these resources for a more complete list. So starting on the lighter end of the medium and heavy duty vehicles. For pickup trucks and small vans, there are a bunch of good options. So many of you have likely heard of the Ford F-150 Lightning. Ford definitely went on an advertising blitz around F-150. But what's key about this vehicle is that it was really designed with fleet in mind. And so it has lots of features that are quite useful. Like I think it has 11 different ports that you can plug in tools, for example, if you need them, including a 240 volt outlet. If you need that level of power for a higher level tool. The range is somewhere between 230 and 320 miles per charge. And the price varies a little bit. We're in a weird spot right now where both the 2023 model and the 2024 model are available. The 2023 model starts around $50,000 and the 2024 model starts around $64,000. But that is definitely one of the more available pickup trucks. You've also got the Rivian R1T, which in the picture here is the gray pickup truck in the middle on the left. It gets well over 300 miles per charge and starts around $70,000. Chevy is coming out with a Silverado electric vehicle truck. That's the blue one on the right. That one will start around $74,000 and get up to 440 miles per charge. Absolutely massive. So if you need a pickup truck for your business, those are some good models. In terms of cargo vans or passenger vans, we've got the Ford E-Transit, which is definitely one of the more available vehicles in this class. It's available as a cargo van or just the chassis cab or as a cutaway, and you have a choice of height and length. And so obviously those all come at different price points, but the very base model is $51,000. And then the Mercedes E-Sprinter is also out there and available. It's a cargo van around $71,000. And there's more options here too. Again, this is just sort of a smattering. In the larger trucks, there's a lot of diversity in terms of what we mean by larger truck here and all the different vehicle classes. So rather than just go through a list of vehicles, I'll highlight that there are a lot of different manufacturers in this space, some newer, some older. A couple to definitely take a look at are XRO. So SEA Electric is a company that builds the electric propulsion systems for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And they were recently acquired by a company called XRO, and they have partnered with Mack and Hino, I never know how to pronounce that company's name, but they have been doing this for a long time and are definitely worth taking a look at. Green Power Motor is also out there building lots of different trucks, including some refrigerated trucks, and then there's Lightning E-Motors, Freightliner, and tons more. So this is where I would say definitely go, talk to Mass Fleet Advisor, but look at the More EV list and those other resources to narrow down based on the vehicles in your fleet, what you might be looking for. And then I know that there's a particular interest in refrigerated trucks. So I wanted to highlight a couple of options here. The EV Star Cargo Refrigerated Van is a refrigerated van that gets 150 miles per charge, and that is built as a refrigerated van. But then there's also options where, for example, you can go with the Thermo King E200, which is a unit that you can add to an electric truck. So you could add that to something like the Ford E-Transit or something like that. Maxwell's EV Pro Cooler is an electric van. The Morgan Polar Steed is an electric truck with a refrigerated unit. And then Kia will release, supposedly, an electric refrigerated van in North America sometime in 2025. And this, I know, is a question for lots of people where if I add a refrigerated unit, what does that do to my range? How will I charge on the go? Those are all kinds of detailed questions that Mass Fleet Advisor can get into, and we'll get into that a little later in the presentation. So before we jump into incentives, I wanted to highlight one other tool that is worth taking a look at, and this one is put out by the Electrification Coalition. I think they call it the DRIVE tool, but even though there's no vowel in there, but it's the DRVE tool. And basically, this is a tool that can put out for you, when you put in information about your fleet, a fuel price comparison based on what vehicles you might electrify and when, what the maintenance costs might look like, and it allows you to input your actual electricity rate rather than having to rely on a national average, which might be lower than what you're actually paying. All you need to be able to use it is the vehicle identification number, or the VIN, the annual mileage, and the vehicle life expectancy. And then it can include incentives from both the federal government and the state. I would definitely say this is worth poking around a little bit, but if you're serious about this, definitely go talk to Mass Fleet Advisor. That will be my sort of refrain in this presentation, is we've got an awesome free resource that can help you get into the nitty-gritty of this really fast, but this is the helpful place to start if you're just kind of wondering. So I'll talk now about incentives for vehicles and then incentives for charging, and then I'll turn it over to Rhys and Jenny. So for incentives for vehicle, the first thing you should know is that there is a federal commercial electric vehicle tax credit that is available thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. The amount of the tax credit is the lesser of 30% of the sales price or the incremental cost of the vehicle compared to a fossil fuel powered version. It's capped at $7,500 for vehicles under 14,000 pounds. And it's capped at $40,000, excuse me, for vehicles over 14,000 pounds. I know that this is a presentation mostly for commercial fleets, but I do want to put out there as a note that this is an incentive that is available to tax exempt entities via the direct pay or exempt pay provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. So if you represent a municipality or a nonprofit that has a fleet of vehicles, this incentive is actually still available to you. And then we'll include the link, and you'll get the slides at the end of this to go learn more about that at the IRS's website. In Massachusetts, we are lucky enough to also have incentives for electric vehicles for commercial fleets. So the first level you should know about is More EV. Again, that's the state rebate program for electric vehicles. For light duty vehicles, there is a $3,500 rebate available for battery electric vehicles that cost less than $55,000. And that is available to individuals, businesses, and nonprofits in Massachusetts. I've already mentioned More EV Truck. That is the sort of carve-out program for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. It's available to residents, businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, government fleets, and the amount varies by class. So I'll show you on the next slide exactly what that looks like. But for all of these, the MSRP must be under $80,000. I think the cap might be slightly higher in some of the heavier vehicles. And then Mass EVIP is a program through the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. This one is only available for public entities. So if you're a private commercial fleet, forget about this. But that is a rebate up to $7,500. So this is a table that shows you by vehicle class what the More EV Truck rebate looks like. So if you're looking at a pickup truck or a transit van like the e-transit that we talked about, the rebate is $7,500. If you go all the way up to a trash truck, which is much, much, much heavier, the rebate can be up to $90,000. Obviously, that $80,000 price limit does not qualify in a place where the rebate is $90,000. That one, I think, is just for the pickup trucks and transit vans. But depending on what vehicle you're looking at, the rebate can be quite substantial, and again, would be on top of the federal tax credit that you would get for that vehicle. Moving right along, I'll switch over to talking about incentives to install charging, because obviously if you're trying to electrify your fleet, you need a place to charge that. Before I jump into the incentives, I want to do a quick charging 101 to just talk about the different levels of charging. So level 1 charging is also called a trickle charge. It adds about 4 miles of range per hour spent charging. It's when you just plug a vehicle into a normal 120 volt outlet. This works for some people who have electric vehicles for their personal use. I would not recommend this for a commercial fleet because you're going to be driving more miles or need to be able to charge faster than someone at home. The next step up is called level 2 charging. It adds somewhere between 11 to 30 or 40 even miles of range per hour, really depending on the vehicle and the charger. This is a good option for a lot of fleets, especially if you can charge up overnight and sort of replenish what you've used during the day. And then the highest level of charging is called DC fast charging. The DC stands for direct current. There's definitely different levels of this. So it can be 50 kilowatts or it can be 350 kilowatts. And that really depends on, or that really influences how quickly you can charge. It's very hard to sort of say an average. We often say 90 miles in 30 minutes. That's if we're talking about a passenger vehicle. For some of these bigger vehicles, it's important to get into the sort of vehicle and charger specific details, which again, Mass Fleet Advisor can help you with. So again, starting at the federal level, there's a tax credit for the installation of charging infrastructure. It covers 30% of the cost or 6% in the cost in the case of a property subject to depreciation, and it's not to exceed $100,000. If the project meets prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, you may be eligible to receive the full 30% regardless of the property's depreciation status. The expenses that are covered do not include permitting or inspection, but they do include bidirectional chargers. So, excuse me, if you want to install a charger that is capable of sending electricity back onto the grid, this would actually cover that cost. But a big caveat with this is that the installation must be in a low-income community or a rural community to qualify. And there's a link where you can check your eligibility. Excuse me, I need a sip of water before I continue. So the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection also has a rebate program to help workplaces and fleets install charging. It's called Mass EVIP. It covers level 1 or level 2 charging. Applicants must have at least 15 employees to be eligible. It covers, excuse me, up to 60% of the hardware and installation costs, up to $50,000 per street address. And you can find more information at this particular link. And here we get into the sort of the meat of this. So in Massachusetts, various utility programs have incentive programs of different types for private fleets to install charging. So first, if your fleet is located in a community that has a municipal light plant, go check with your municipal light plant. They may or may not have a program depending on which one they are. If you, excuse me, are served by National Grid or Eversource, you may have a program. So in both cases, utility program covers up to 100% of infrastructure upgrades. So that's everything up to the actual installation of the unit for both level 2. Excuse me, guys, it's allergy season and my throat is not happy. For level 2 or DC fast charging for fleet customers. There is a slight difference though. For National Grid, funding is still available for light, medium, and heavy duty vehicle fleets. For Eversource, funding is only available for light duty vehicle fleets. In all cases, you must choose equipment from a list of approved qualified equipment from the utility. And this part is key. You must apply for available and aligned third-party funding, such as Mass EVIP on the previous slide, but you cannot stack those incentives with funding from the electric utility. And this is something, again, Mass Fleet Advisor can help you understand and walk through. And then finally, there are no utility rebates for the purchase of the hardware itself, excuse me, or any networking fees to hook those stations up to the internet, basically. Okay, last couple of slides. I hope my throat can get through them, and then I'll turn it over to Rhys and Jenny. So in terms of charging, there are a couple of programs you should be aware of regarding charging rates. The first is National Grid has an off-peak charging rebate program that is available to individuals, but also fleet customers, where basically if you charge between 9 p.m. and 1 p.m., which are off-peak hours, you get to pay a lower rate per kilowatt hour of electricity. So in the summer months, you save 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and in the non-summer months, you save 3 cents per kilowatt hour, especially if you have a fleet that can add up. The point of this is we want to shift electric vehicle usage to times where the costs are lower on the grid. So this is definitely a benefit you should be aware of if you're in National Grid territory. Regardless of if you're in National Grid or Eversource territory, there's another rate that you should be aware of, which is the Demand Charge Alternative Program. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term demand charge, that is a charge that is not volumetric, so it's not per kilowatt hour, but it's per kilowatt, excuse me. And so basically it is a charge that you pay based on your maximum power draw in any particular billing period. And that can often be quite a lot depending on how often a DC fast charging station is used. So National Grid and Eversource developed a program where you get a discount on that demand charge based on how much that station is used. And that is measured by a term called load factor. So if your load factor is less than 5%, you don't have to pay a demand charge. If it's between 5 and 10%, you get a 75% reduction in the demand charge. If it's between 10 and 15, you get a 50% reduction in the demand charge. And so you only have to pay the demand charge when that load factor is over 15%. So that's definitely something to consider depending on what type of charging you're installing, how much, and all that. But with that, I will finally actually turn it over to Rhys and Jenny to talk about Mass Fleet Advisor.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. Happy to relieve you of speaking duties for at least a couple of slides. So again, Rhys Webb from Mass CEC. And for those of you who are not familiar with Mass CEC, we are a quasi-public state agency. So we're largely funded by a small surcharge on ratepayers' utility bills. We also receive some federal funding, but generally we are publicly funded. And so really what our mission is in this state is to decrease greenhouse gas emissions and to accelerate the clean energy economy. We do that a few different ways. But on the transportation team, we really focus on some pilot and demonstration projects and filling the gaps in the market. And so Mass Fleet Advisor was really born out of a gap that we saw. Both of the utilities have fleet advisory services for public fleets, but there were no similar services for private and commercial fleets. So that's where we wanted to step in and provide those advisory services for fleets in Massachusetts. So if you move to the next slide, Anna. What Mass Fleet Advisor is it's a totally free program where we provide participating fleets with technical assistance to really teach them how to electrify and provide them with all of the information they need to know to make an informed decision. So that includes a total cost of ownership analysis, vehicle to vehicle analysis. We'll do an on-site assessment, and Jenny will get into the details a little further along, but really just want to be there to kind of hold your hand through the process and take some of that burden of sorting through all the information and doing the research off of your plate, because it can be confusing and it can be a lot. So Mass CEC provides the funding for this program, and we work with CALSTART and Power Options, as well as a team of other experts in the industry to provide these services to you all. So Jenny is the lead relationship manager for any private and commercial fleets, and Power Options is the lead relationship manager for any nonprofit fleets. And so if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what eligibility means for this program. So really what a fleet needs is they have to operate in or depot in Massachusetts. They need to be private, so non-government. We've recently received funding to expand the program, which was very exciting. And so another gap that we had identified was were public fleets in municipal light plant communities. So public fleets that are not eligible for Eversource or National Grid fleet advisory services are now eligible for the Mass Fleet Advisor program. So kind of the broad umbrella eligibility is that if you are not eligible for utility services, come to us and we will help you out. So fleets need to have at least 3 vehicles within the program or within their fleet, and at least one of those vehicles needs to be a medium or heavy duty vehicle. So it needs to be eligible for the More EV Trucks funding. We are also aiming to have at least 50% of our fleets operating in or depoted in environmental justice communities. We really want to make sure that the benefits of this program and the benefits of any air quality emissions reductions are felt by those communities that need it most and are the most overburdened by transportation emissions. So we do have a specific emphasis on environmental justice communities. And what's really great about this program is that it is all informational. There's no requirements to purchase any vehicles. There's no funding to purchase any vehicles through our program. It's really just informational and helping you, again, make an informed decision about whether electrification is right for your fleet. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Jenny, who will talk a little bit more about the details.
Thanks so much, Rhys. Yeah, just really want to emphasize that this program is completely free for the fleet to participate. There's no cost to you. We're not giving any grant money towards buying vehicles, but what we really want to do is just talk with the individual fleets, meet you where you're at, talk about the vehicles that are in your fleet and how we can provide information, answer the questions that you might have, answer the questions that you might not even be considering, understanding that everyone has a business to run and doesn't really have time to focus on this. That's where we come in. We want to be kind of an electrification guide and provide you with personal information, right? You know, we've talked a lot about, and Anna's given a lot of great information about what electrification means, but it still can be quite dizzying. And so we want to talk to you and really speak on a personal level about here's the vehicles that you have and here's the range that you could do and things like that. So what do we need from the fleet? The fleet will reach out to us either through the website or through our email. You can sign up at massfleetadvisor.org. And we'll set up a pre-participation call to talk through your fleet, understand where the vehicles are domiciled, how many vehicles you have, make sure that you're eligible for the program and all of those things like that. We have a brief participation agreement that just says that you're going to provide us with vehicle data and we won't share that outside of Mass CEC and CalSTART and the project team. And then we send you a fleet intake form where you provide us information about those vehicles, vehicle make, model, year, the operational schedules, how many hours per day you're driving, things like that. We also will schedule an on-site physical site assessment where we'll have one of our electrician teams come out and take a look at where chargers might be installed at your facility. We'll also do a solar analysis to understand whether solar panels would make sense for vehicle charging. And if the vehicles that you have already have GPS data in them and you are willing to share that data with us, we can do a more in-depth route energy analysis, which basically means we'd understand how many miles it's driving, how many hours per day you're operating, where the vehicle is idling, what the kind of grades that you might deal with as far as like the drive cycle. And so if you have GPS data, we can use that. If you're willing to install data loggers, we can put them in on a temporary basis. Or if that's not something that you want to pursue, we can just do a high-level analysis. So the program is really adaptable to whatever makes sense for the fleet, and we can talk you through all that. Total time from the fleet side is about 3 to 5 hours, including all of the intake information and then just support of the on-site analysis. Next slide, please. For an example, wanted to share with everyone because everybody asked, well, what am I going to get out of this? What's it going to look like? So we've been sharing this example table of contents with everyone. So you'll get a report that will be delivered to you in a PDF form. And then we will also schedule a meeting to go through all of the insights that the report has with you. There's an executive summary, all of your fleet information, one-to-one vehicle replacement options, information about all the financing that Anna covered in more depth and how it would apply directly to your fleet. Total cost of ownership calculation, what the savings would look like for an electric vehicle over the vehicle's life, talking about maintenance and fuel costs and how that stacks up against an electric vehicle. And then all of the links that are in the document would be live links so that you could click through, and as fundings might change, you'd be able to get all of that information. So it's really quite a great educational program. Like I said, we're not really trying to push you in any way, and we're not approaching this with rose-colored glasses. We really want to look at the duty cycles and say, yep, this duty cycle makes sense to go for electrification, or maybe not on this one. So if we go to the next slide, I can show you an example of one of our fleets that have participated that has given us permission to share their information. So for example here, this is a fleet that has a number of delivery vans in their fleet. As you can see, we provide the one-for-one vehicle replacement options, the 4D Transit, the Lightning Motors Transit Cargo Van, and then the SCA Electric upfitted Ford Transit van as well. We have a total cost of ownership modeled on the right for the diesel vehicle and the battery vehicle. So total cost of ownership is lower for the electric vehicle because of the low purchase price of the 4D Transit and also the more EV rebate that's available for this vehicle. Next slide, please. This is an example of the site assessment that you would receive. So this specific fleet had 3 different locations. So we would summarize in the report, and obviously in much more detail than this, what kind of charging you would need, and also the electrical impact to your existing infrastructure, whether you could install chargers or whether you would need a new service line or a new transformer or things like that. And we have been working with both National Grid and Eversource to get personalized information for each fleet that's participating. One thing we haven't really talked about yet is that we want to recruit 200 fleets to the program to get your personalized fleet electrification report. If you get the report and you say, yeah, you know what, I'm really interested in buying an electric vehicle, we have a second part of the program that, again, is no cost to you to participate, and we're not providing any money, but we can also help you with procurement technical support. And what does that mean? We can connect you with local dealerships. For example, if you wanted to buy a Ford Transit van and install a refrigerated unit, we have contacts for both of those, and we can put you in touch with the right people to make sure that what you're ordering is what you need. We can review requests for proposals if you want to put those together. We can help to identify existing grant opportunities and upcoming grant opportunities to reduce the upfront cost for you, put together some EV 101 type things like the things that Anna's put together, some training materials, development of standard operating procedures. So, if you are looking to buy a vehicle, our support won't end with the first report. We can continue to help you through navigating that process. And that's kind of a summary of the program. We've got plenty of spots available right now, but we are encouraging folks to sign up sooner rather than later so that we can get the information to you and help folks with their journey.
Well, thank you both for that overview. I will encourage everybody who's on to paste some questions in the chat. This slide will just cover if you'd like to reach out to us individually, this is how to get a hold of us. And while we wait for some good questions that I hope are coming, I will share this slide because I'm contractually obliged to mention that we are a nonprofit organization. And we love putting on free educational content like this, but we rely on folks who can donate to make it possible. So if you are able and so inclined, we definitely would always welcome any support that you can give. And then I want to also highlight that if you want to learn more about all of this, there's lots of different ways that you can get engaged with us. We've got a pledge and a newsletter and Facebook groups and EV ambassadors and events and all sorts of stuff. So definitely check out our website at greenenergyconsumers.org if you'd like to get engaged with any of these things. But with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions. And while I wait, I have one, which is, what would you recommend if someone has a fleet that has no medium or heavy duty vehicles right now? Where do you recommend that they go? Is it the drive tool that we shared, or are there other resources or tips that you can think of?
Yeah, I'm going to toss that to Rhys a little bit more to talk about the options in Massachusetts. But if a fleet has at least one medium and heavy duty vehicle in their fleet, so that Ford Lightning or Transit van or anything that's kind of on that medium duty, we can certainly assist. And it's important to note that we will do the assessment of the one-to-one vehicle comparison and the total cost of ownership modeling for every vehicle in the fleet, not just the medium and heavy duty vehicles. So if they do have sedans as part of their fleet or SUVs, things like that, we will also do that assessment as part of the Mass Fleet Advisor Fleet Electrification Report. However, if a vehicle has no Class 2B or above vehicles at all, there are some resources available. And I will turn it over to Rhys.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, and I think the Drive tool is a good resource, and I also think that Green Energy Consumers Drive Green tool is a good resource just to sort through, you know, what are the vehicles that are available, what is the mileage. I think part of why we created Mass Fleet Advisor to be medium and heavy duty specific is that it is just much more complicated than transitioning over a light duty fleet. And so I think it takes a little more hand holding, and there's more hesitation and more unknowns around the duty cycles of those vehicles. So I think for fleets that don't have medium and heavy duty and would not be eligible for Mass Fleet Advisor, I think the tools that you suggested would be the right way to go.
Great. I have one clarifying question about the demand charge slide that I shared. Because I failed to explain one of the columns. So there's a column here called enrollment year. And basically what this means is if you install a bank of level 2 chargers, so like 4 to 12 level 2 chargers or a DC fast charging station, you're likely already, if that already exists, you're likely on a different rate right now than this demand charge alternative. It is something that you have to actively switch that meter over to. And if you're installing new charging stations, obviously there's new, so there's no historical data. And so the reason why there's a 100% demand charge in the first year of enrollment is to give the utility time to collect data on what is your load factor actually, because if it hasn't existed before, we don't know what the load factor is, or if it was on a previous, a different rate where that kind of information wasn't being tracked, we don't know what the load factor is. So the idea is in the first year, you just get 100% demand discount. We figure out what the load factor is, and then moving forward after that, it is adjusted based on the load factor of the previous year, I think. So really, what this means is for the first year, if you're enrolled in this, everybody gets a demand charge discount. And then for the following years, it is actually based on your load factor. And I will say that if you're interested in this, there's a link here to a blog post that we wrote, because this gets very complicated very fast, because when you switch onto this rate, it does adjust your volumetric. so your per kilowatt hour charge as well. So it's important to look at the details of this, and the folks at National Grid and Eversource can also help you walk through like what would this actually mean for my particular charging station. But that's what that enrollment years column meant. And I'm sorry that I didn't explain that the first time around. I don't see any questions, but I have one. That's a curiosity question, which is, what has been the biggest hurdle in your experience so far, either in getting folks to sign up for the fleet advisory services or then move forward once they've gotten their initial report?
That's a great question. And honestly, our biggest challenge has been recruitment. How do we get the information out there and make sure that fleets have information about the program, that they know that the program exists, and how we can highlight really what the program can do for the fleets, right? I think, just saying, oh, we have this free program for you. We thought this would be a really easy thing to market, but we're finding it more difficult. And so once we started getting some fleets through the program and we were able to deliver a few of the reports, everyone has been like, oh, this is a great report. This is so much more detailed than I anticipated, which is wonderful. But we're like, okay, how can we really market this and make sure that folks understand that we're here to help and that we want to make it personal, and how do we reach fleets where they're at? So we've actually brought on a new marketing consultant. So we're going to hopefully see some more, PR. And then we're also hoping to have more in-person events now that we're past the pandemic and we can get together in person, because I found one of the biggest things for getting folks interested in electric vehicles is actually getting to see them and touch them and realize that it's not just vaporware, that these things are out there, that they can do what duty cycles folks need. So I'm really excited for some in-person events, hopefully later this year.
Yeah, and I think I would absolutely second Jenny. I think sometimes people hear free and it feels like there's a catch, but there's really no catch. We're just trying to provide information. And so to answer the second part of your question, Anna, about once people get the report, I think one of the big challenges that we try to help people work through is just timing and trying to figure out, okay, when does this vehicle need to be replaced? What is the timeline for getting delivery of a new electric vehicle? What is the timeline for getting charging stations installed? Are you going to need any facility upgrades or infrastructure upgrades? And I think matching all of those up can be a big lift. And so I think that's also partly why we're here, is we have really great contacts at both of the utilities to help facilitate that process as early as we can and really get them into the conversation as early as possible so they know it's coming and they can be prepared for it as well. So it's not taking, these extended timelines to get infrastructure in if you've got the vehicle. And so I would say that's one of the biggest hurdles I see, is just the timing aspect of it all.
Yeah, and to that point, we really want to make sure that folks understand that they don't need to go from 0 to 100 in 60 seconds, right? That you don't have to say, I'm going to do 100% electrification of my fleet in the next year. Nobody thinks that that's realistic. And we really want to work with folks and say, okay, what does it look like for you? How many vehicles do you have in your fleet? What is your usual replacement timeline? Do you keep your vehicles for a certain number of miles, a certain number of years? And if you're thinking about electrification, let's talk about the first vehicle or two that would be easy to electrify for you. And then also, does it make sense to do one charger or two chargers now? What would you need for your entire fleet, and how we can kind of lay out those milestones of what they need to do for the short term and the long term to move towards achieving 100% fleet electrification at some point.
I guess a flip side question, actually one clarifying question. This program is available to nonprofit fleets, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've had very many nonprofits participate.
How would you describe like the easiest use case right now? Like what kind of fleet, when they show up, are you like, great, we can get you going, this one's easy? What does that look like?
Honestly, it's the small business that has things like the medium duty vehicles, that has the Ford Transit van, because that's such a prolific vehicle right now that it's out there, it's available, folks are using it, and it does really what the duty cycle is needed. Obviously, as you get towards the more heavy duty vehicles, the longer drives, then we want to talk about a little bit more what folks might need. So someone who has a small business, like a flower delivery business or a cleaner, dry cleaner, things like that, food delivery, Those are all really easy to electrify segments. And again, easy for us is we're excited to work with any fleet. Like if you have 150 vehicles and they're all from class 2B to class 8, bring it on. We're excited for the challenge, and we want to find those vehicles for you because we know that that is a huge barrier. It's just like, where do I start? So, for us, that's really great. But as far as easiest to electrify or easiest to find a vehicle or two, it's really those folks that are in the medium duty sector, kind of that presentation slide that I had given about the transit vans.
I see one request to revisit the incentive slides. So let me do that. I guess I should start by pressing the right button. Go backwards. So I think this is the slide that was requested. So I'll Loie, if you have a specific question, let me know. But one thing I can stress a little bit more or explain a little bit more is that when you're installing charging, there's basically two buckets of costs. One is the infrastructure upgrades, and one is the actual hardware and installation itself. So when I say infrastructure upgrades, I mean anything that the utility or an electrician needs to do to get electrical service to the location where you want to install the charger. So that might include laying new conduit or trenching through a parking lot or anything like that. That's all considered infrastructure upgrades. And then the hardware is going and actually buying the unit and basically plugging it into the electrical service that you've brought to the charging pad. And so for fleets and workplaces, Mass EVIP will cover the hardware and installation piece of it, not the infrastructure piece. And the utility funding covers the infrastructure piece and not the hardware. But because of an order from the Department of Public Utilities, you can't stack those incentives in a way that is quite frustrating. But that's one thing I should have clarified when we were going through this slide, is that this is not talking about the infrastructure piece. It's just talking about buying the station, installing the station, assuming you brought electrical service to the charging location. Loie, does that answer the question that you were bringing up?
Yeah, this is, I think, maybe the only state incentive that's available for charging locations that are not accessible to the public.
Yes. So the Mass EVIP program out of the Department of Environmental Protection has lots of sort of sub-programs. So there's one about public access charging, there's one at educational campuses, but this one we pulled out anything that has to do with fleets specifically. So here, there's not a requirement that the public has access to this charger at all. It is, do you have a fleet or employees who need to use this? If you look at the public access charging ones, then there are requirements around how many hours of the day is that charger available to the public. But this one, because it's fleet specific, does not have that requirement. Okay. Well, with that, I don't see any more questions, and I'm happy to give everybody 5 minutes back in their day before the next meeting. So thank you all very much for joining us, and a big thanks to Rhys and Jenny for bringing in your expertise. I will definitely share the slides and recording ASAP, as well as a link to sign up with Mass Fleet Advisor, and I hope you all do. But you're, again, welcome to reach out to any of us if you have any questions, but have a lovely day, and see you at another event soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.